the Irrational Skeptic here, and today I'm going to be doing a video on or continuing the MBTI anime series, and I will be typing the character Misa Amane from Death Note. And if you haven't already seen my video where I type several of the other characters, you can go back and watch that. I will be making maybe one tweak in this video, which will challenge some of the things I said in my previous video. It will be particularly concerning Light Yagami's type, so stick in for that. And so, moving on, Misa Amane. Quick backstory is that she is a girl, a very bubbly girl. She was protected for most of her life by a death god called Jealous, and Jealous ended up saving her life by killing some of her assailants who were trying to kill or harm her. And one of the rules of the Death Note is that you cannot end people's life prematurely, or not just prematurely, but in order to save another person. And I think that's the particular rule. So he had to give up his life in order to save Misa. And so what happens is Rem, a death god as well, picks up the Death Note of Jealous and takes it to Misa and gives it to her, saying Jealous saved her life, so she believes that Misa deserves this Death Note. And at the same time, Misa also did a deal for the Shimigami eyes, which allow someone to see the date, the name of someone, and also when the person is going to die, except for those who have a death note as well. You cannot see when they're gonna die, or you can't see either of that information actually. And so yeah, and if you haven't watched Death Note, you can go watch it. It's a whole very interesting dynamic she has between Light Yagami and L as well, and she's a very interesting character. And so moving on to her type, I believe that she is an ENFP, that is extroverted intuitive dominant, introverted feeling auxiliary, extroverted thinking tertiary, and introverted sensing inferior. And this is contrary to many typings I have seen online in the MBTI community and in anime fandoms, that they've tried to type her as an ESFP. And I believe that this mistake happens because people tend to think that because she was so focused on her looks, she was a star, she was an actress, and she did commercials, so she just had this whole extroverted sensing vibe to her. But I would like to clarify this and say that she has more pointers towards her being an extroverted intuitive, and the extroverted sensing traits, which are there, the ones I mentioned, they are there, but this is, in her case, this is her demon function, or this is her eighth function. And the reason why she is accessing this a lot is it also applies to if you know a lot about different MBTI systems, you'll find that the last function, so the eighth function, is actually a very visible one to the world. It's one that we almost project for people to see in the world. It ends up being this function, so the last eighth, and the third, the tertiary. And so this would mean that we would see a lot of extroverted thinking and extroverted sensing coming from her, which in its very scattered manner, because she is still an extrovert intuitive, we don't quite get how it's put together. Um, because it looks like it's happening haphazardly, while at the same time she's seeming to get a death god to protect her. She's seeming to escape trouble so much. She's a star. She's making good money. She's a very bubbly and lucky go free girl. But we have to really look at a few things in order to ascertain that she's actually an ENFP. One of them is that ENFPs tend to have something from their childhood which leaves some kind of mark, or something from their past in general, which leaves some kind of mark that they use as a driver through life. They will self reference certain events over and over again. And by self referencing these, they plan to change the future. So, this is where the possibilities come from. I don't want that same thing that happened to me before to happen again. So I will create many different things and many different paths which I can take in order for that to never happen again. And so this would be contrary to an ESFP who has extroverted sensing as or introverted sensing as the opposite of their dominant, which even though it is unconscious, they still have access to this function in a semi healthy manner. They know about it and they can use it. But it's not something that has as much of an impact on their overall conscious psyche as the inferior function. And so we're talking about acting consciously here. And so she's consciously aware of introverted sensing, but at a very low level, and may not be aware to the extent that it is a driver of her need for love, for example, her need to find true love, which is also related to introverted feeling, of course, because introverted feeling tends to look for those pure and distilled emotions to its most basic and the essence of it, so the essence of love. And so we can see her being very extreme when it comes to this, and that she tells Kira, you can do anything with me, you can even use me, I just want you to love me. And in this, she also wants to love him no matter what, no matter what his goals are, no matter if he wants to kill people, no matter if he wants to kill his own father, no matter if he wants to tell her to kill 1,000 people. She doesn't care, because if she really loves Light, then she would do anything for him. And the death god that gave her Jealous's death note realizes this, and also realizes that Rem also realizes that that there is this connection between the two of them that can never be broken. And this is why Rem even has his own sacrifice in saving Misa, for the same reason. For the same reason of love, that of not wanting anything bad to ever happen to her. And so moving on, if we look at how she has the overarching theme of her life, you can see extroverted intuition everywhere in the way that she manages to create a very sneaky way to find out who Kira is by sending letters all over, planning it out, making sure that you're giving a list of instructions to Kira, but hidden within those lists of instructions is a particular place that she wants him to be at a particular time, so that she can look and not be able to see the date and the name over his head. So even though he was surrounded by other officers at the time, she wasn't able to see his information above his head, and so she knew that he was Kira, that Light was Kira. And even though she was very careful, very meticulous, she did miss a few things. And this comes to show of the lower extroverted thinking that was in place. Because when Light was questioning her, he didn't take into account things such as a hair that might be found on the envelopes. She did not take that into account. And it's something that most likely Kira would have taken into account if he was carrying out that plan. But it's just to give you an idea of the extroverted intuition, extroverted thinking going on with her, that she's thinking of all the possible ways in which she can get caught. And she takes very brave steps, even to the extent of walking up to his house and introducing herself, because she's laid out all the possible scenarios, but at the same time, her introverted feeling is so strong for Kira that she's unable to withhold herself from going and meeting him and introducing herself. You see, so she does make mistakes, and I would attribute this to a not very strong extroverted thinking. And so moving on to why I might make a correction on one of the typings which I did before, I would consider Light Yagami to be an INTJ, mostly because the INTJ and ENFP mix is very apparent. When you're actually looking at these two types, and when they're together in a relationship, you can see how they cover each other's blind spots. And so for Light, she is able to think faster on her feet and carry into action plans that weren't laid out before. With Light, he has to have all this meticulous plan going on, and unless he had set up what's the word? Unless he had set up contingency plans from the beginning, it would be very hard for him to come up with a plan on the spot. And so the logic game going on between Light and L is very apparent, in that one is trying to plan out the whole thing from beginning to end, including losing his death note, losing his memory, getting it back, while L, who is an INTP, is making the puzzle along as he goes. So as he gets more evidence, he increases his likelihood that Light is indeed Kira. And ever since L approached him at the school, L was pretty sure that Light was Kira. But he had to prove it. He needed evidence. And he needed to use logical deduction in order to cancel out all possibilities to leave him as being Kira. So we can say he was sure from the beginning, but to prove it, that was the problem, and that was the fun game going on, was that even though L knew Light was Kira, he had to prove it all beyond reasonable doubt. And for the same thing with Light Yagami, even though he knew he was Kira, and even though he knew L knew he was Kira, he knew that if he wasn't able to prove it beyond reasonable doubt, that he would get away scotch-free. And the way Misa Amane fits into this whole picture is that the last minute plans that need to be carried out, the extroverted, intuitive changing of possibilities that needed to happen, were carried out by her. She actually ended up being an essential piece to him succeeding, even though she added to the complexity of him being able to succeed, since having two Kiras is not going to be as easy for him as having just one. But he found out that he was able to push a lot of the load of work onto her, for example, for her to go on writing names while he went about his day. And so, in this sense, he was able to use her, and she asked him to use her, um, because she, as I said before, really has this introverted feeling, of pure love for him. And another thing I want to attribute to her being an ENFP is that look at the whole story from beginning to end. She seems to be one of the only people, uh, just her and Near, that made it out of this thing alive. You know, she seemed to be one of the only people that makes it out alive, and you can attribute this to luck, but you can also attribute this to she she took out every possibility until its end. And after exhausting everything she could do, after loving Light until the end, she had to take the last way out, you know, which was going on living her life without him. And hey, she had a she showed her love till the very end, and since it wasn't able to happen, she had to, create a new life and come up with something else. Uh, and lastly, if you want to compare to a character who I consider to be an ESFP, who I'll probably do a video on in the future, is Ino from Naruto. I would consider her to be an ESFP. And if you put her in opposition to Misa, you would see that the one is scattered in a very extroverted, intuitive way. Even her way of dressing, her way of behavior, she's very sweet all the time. While you have Ino, even though acting sweet, you can kind of see that underneath pressure of extroverted sensing there, and that she's very apparent and strong in the world, while Misa is a little bit more hidden. You never really know her true intentions. You know, uh, you can she can be clear about it to Light, but everyone else around is just able to see a very happy, bubbly girl in love that's in love. And she's able to play that off so well that you can only attribute that to her being an ENFP, as well as seeing the dynamic between what would be an INTJ and an ENFP. So the INTJ making all the plans, and the ENFP being able to carry out their dream life in a sense, but within certain constraints of an overarching plan. So, yeah, just consider that for some time. I think I'll end it there. If anyone thinks that she is of a different type or she's an ESFP, instead, you can leave your comments down below. I am pretty 100% sure of an ENFP typing for her. Um, Left contentious, Light Yagami could be an INTJ, and some of the reasoning being because the dynamic between INTJ and ENFP is seen in the dynamic between Misa and Light. So that will be it for now. I'll see you guys in the next one. I will probably continue the MBTI anime series with Naruto, and leave down in the comments if you want me to do characters from other anime shows. I watch a lot of different anime. Maybe I might do Code Geass, because Lelouch is a very interesting character who I would like to type. And stick around to find out. I will see you all later. The Irrational Skeptic signing off.